Okay, let's just make sure we're alive. Yep, we are alive. Welcome to our Bible study, Vision Fellowship. It's kind of a nasty day, weather-wise, so Doris has been faithful to come, but we don't have anyone else here at the moment, so later I'll post this, and hopefully we'll have a few more come. Well, a few more watch online. Let's open with a word of prayer. Lord Jesus, Holy Father, God, be with us. Help us to hear your word and apply it to our lives. Let your spirit be upon us, and your glory and your love. We thank you and praise you for your presence, for your love and grace. In Jesus' name. Okay, so today we continue on with what is sometimes called the Sermon on the Plain, but might be the Sermon on the Mount. Just we don't really just shortened by Luke as he edited it down. We don't really know. Contains a lot of similar elements to the Sermon on the Mount, but some that are different. And so as we talk about some of those things again today, we'll compare them a little bit with the Sermon on the Mount and what's there and what's not, and see. So last time we talked about what we would normally call the Beatitudes and blessings, but Luke's version also includes woes. Woes to those who are rich and comfortable and full and laughing because if they're self-satisfied, they already have their rewards. And so that isn't in the Sermon on the Mount in that way. Although there are warnings throughout the Sermon on the Mount to those who are self-satisfied, they're not put in there as woes like this as opposed to blessings. Okay, so we don't know, again, we don't know whether this is just a different sermon he's preaching in a different place using some of the same elements, but a little different emphasis. I sort of tend to prefer that, thinking of this as a separate sermon. Jesus has used some of the same elements he preached in the Sermon on the Mount, but he's also used some different ones. But obviously Luke's cut down a sermon that might have been an hour or two to, 3/4 of a chapter. So it's a 5-minute sermon here. So that's quite a editorial reduction. So obviously he's left a bunch of stuff out. So is it Luke cutting stuff out or Jesus cutting stuff out? Well, probably both, actually. So anyway, so after the Beatitudes, in Matthew's coverage of the Sermon on the Mount, what Jesus does next is the rest of chapter 5, which is the first part of the Sermon on the Mount, is set up structurally where Jesus says, "You have heard it said," and he quotes something from the Old Testament or the Pharisees' interpretation of the Old Testament often. And then he says, "But I say to you," and then he tells you what he thinks we ought to think and do. And so Jesus is doing there a comparison of the Pharisees' teaching with his teaching. And he's showing how they are different and what it means to be part of the kingdom of God spiritually, not just externally. The Pharisees were focused on externals. Jesus says over and over again, no, it's not the externals that count, it's what's in your heart and what you do as a result of what's in your heart. In Luke, he doesn't do that. In the Luke sermon, it doesn't do that. It may be as simple as if Jesus is preaching somewhere in the north part of Galilee over near Tyre and Sidon, he's preaching to a Gentile crowd. He doesn't need to discuss what the Pharisees are teaching. This Gentile Jewish mixed crowd doesn't hear the Pharisees very much. They're not around the temple in Jerusalem and where the Pharisees would have been. So he probably doesn't need to talk about that. So that may be one reason it's not here. The first couple things that are in this sermon are parts of chapter 5, but they're the positive part of one of those teachings that says, you have heard it said, but I say to you, and you only hear the but what I say to you part. So that's here. So the first section, or the first paragraph here, is pretty much verses 27 to 36. And Doris, if you would read that for me, that would be great.
But I say unto you that hear, love your enemies, do good to them that hate you. Bless them that curse you, and pray for them who despitefully use you. And unto him that smiteth thee on one cheek, also offer the other. And him that taketh away thy cloak, forbid him to not take thy coat also. Give to every man that asketh of thee, and of him that taketh away thy goods ask them not again. And as you would that men should do to you, do ye also to them. For if you love them who love you, what thanks have you? For sinners also love those who love them. But if you do good to them who do good to you, what thanks have ye? For sinners also do even the same. And if you lend to them of whom ye hope to receive, what thanks have ye? For sinners also lend to sinners, to receive as much again. But love your enemies and do good, and lend, hoping for nothing again. And your reward shall be great, and you shall be the sons of the highest, for he is kind unto the thankful and to the evil. Be ye therefore merciful, as your Father also is merciful.
So now, in the Sermon on the Mount, we'll go back and compare just real roughly. Jesus talks about believers being salt and light. That's not included here. He talks about how he's come to fulfill the law. And that's kind of a preamble to the section about his teaching versus the Pharisees' teaching, or what you've heard it said. So those two sections aren't here at all. Then the first few of the sections about you've heard it said, but I say to you, the first one's about murder. You've heard it said don't murder, but I say to you, no, don't even be angry. Next section, do not commit adultery, but again, this isn't included. And then the practice of divorce, and then not breaking an oath is something else. And then he gets to one of the last you have heard it said, which is actually the one that this positive stuff that Luke picks up comes out of. You have heard it said that an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you, don't resist the evil. And so, on the contrary, if anyone slaps you on the right cheek, give to him the other also, and so on. And the rest of what Jesus says down through the end of chapter 5 is similar, although not the exact same order, to what Luke records here. So it's a big chunk of very similar content. Not exactly the same, but very similar. So and Luke even records, but I say to you, at the start of this. But he makes it a contrast with the woes. That's the but is always says this is a contrast. So He says, for you guys who are self-satisfied, woe unto you. But I say to you, this is how you ought to live. But I say to you who are willing to listen, that you ought to do this. Okay. So love your enemies and do good to those who hate you. Now this isn't an entirely unique idea with Jesus. It's present certainly in the Old Testament, in many places. Even the Pharisees, as bad as they were a lot of times in being outside and legalistic, did have some rabbis who taught this kind of stuff. So it wasn't entirely out of bounds to their teaching. But most of them tended to go for that eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth stuff. So Jesus says, love your enemies, do good for those who hate you, bless those who curse you, pray for those who mistreat you. Certainly this isn't our natural, just kind of emotional response. Oh yeah, you treated me like dirt, I'm going to love you. So, when somebody treats you badly, it's hard sometimes to love them back. Somebody does something that's hard, you tend not to love. If anyone hits you on the cheek, offer him the other also. The wording here is a little different, and it has a little bit of a different implication. The Matthew passage, the way it's worded about striking you on one cheek and then letting him strike the other is almost in a context which implies kind of a formal thing. The closest thing we would think of is kind of like, an old challenge where someone was offended and you slapped them on one cheek to show that, you were displeased and, it's to slap them. This almost reads, the words are a little harsher and you can't really tell in English, but this almost reads like someone's assaulted you. They didn't come up and just slapped you lightly, as a sense that they were offended. They'd come out and thrown a good hook and whacked you. And Jesus is still saying, offer the other one. And this is again an example of doing good to those who have done bad to you, or not resisting them. If anyone takes away your coat, don't hold back your shirt. And again, it's a little different. It's the same, but it's a little different. We hear in Matthew, if someone takes your shirt, give them your cloak also. This reverses the order. Now, for someone to take your shirt, you have to take your cloak off. And it almost implies that it's being done legally. Someone's gone after you because you owe them money, so they're taking the shirt off your back. And we use that expression to say, and it's from that Bible passage, but we use that expression to talk about someone who is so avaricious that they don't care that they're making you poor, to take what they want, even if they're already rich. But the order of things in Luke is kind of backwards of that, and again it almost implies violence. The cloak would be the first thing you could take off, and the shirt would be the second. So if you were being robbed and someone said, give me your cloak, that's what they would take first, and the shirt. So again, it implies maybe more of a little bit more violence rather than maybe a legal setting or someone trying to get payment out of a poor man. It's not exact, but the implication is maybe a little more that way. Give to everyone who asks from you. Everyone? Give to everyone who asks from you. And from the one who takes away your things, don't ask for them back. Okay. Just as you want others to do for you, do the same for them. That's the golden rule, right? Do for others as you would have them do for you. There is a similar teaching in some of the rabbis, but it's the negative side. It's don't do to someone else what you would not have done to you. Okay, so if you don't want to be treated badly, don't treat someone else badly. But what Jesus says is do good, the good that you would want done to you. Do it to everybody. So that's the positive, right? Do good to others. And really, in a great way, what Jesus says, and we call it the golden rule, is really just a restatement of the second commandment. Love your neighbor as yourself, right? Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Love them and do good things for them as yourself, as you would like people to love you and do to you. So, give to everyone who asks from you. From the one who takes away your things, don't ask them back. Just as you want others to do for you, do the same for them. And then he has a list of 3 negative examples, in a sense, but they're kind of positive examples in that this is kind of the way the world works. And there is some positive in the world. Jesus is not saying there's no positive in the world. But he's saying, look, the way the world does positive is it's reciprocal, right? You know, you do this for me, I do that for you. You do this for me, I do that for you. You do this for me, I do that for you. And that's the examples Jesus makes. They're all 3 that kind of example. So if you love them who love you, what credit's that to you? Sinners do the same thing. The world does that. You know, you're no different than anybody else if you just love the people who also show love to you. And then he goes on and says, you know, if you do what is good to those who are good to you, what credit is that to you? Even sinners do that. So instead of talking about love, the general feeling and direction, he talks about the practical stuff. If you do good physically, you know, you're doing good to me, so I'm going to do some good to you. You would support each other and stuff like that. That's great. Jesus is not saying this is bad, but he's saying, you know, this is everyday world stuff. Everyday world people do this kind of stuff. If you really want to love people, you need to do more than this, is what he's trying to say. And of course, the last example is financial. If you lend to others expecting to receive, what credit is that to you? Even sinners lend to sinners expecting to be repaid in full, probably with a little bit of interest, but paid in full. So if I loan to someone expecting that they're going to be paying me back and I'm going to get some interest out of it, you know, what does that make it? Does that make me a great person? No. You know, that's what everybody does in the world. If I can loan to somebody and make some money off it, that's the world's way of doing things. But if I see someone who has a need, they ask me for a loan, and I loan it to them, and, you know, maybe they'll pay me back, maybe they won't, but I'm not going to worry about it. It's a different attitude. that can, a Christian, I think, can do that. I know a person who loaned to someone I knew. And when the person who they had loaned to was also a Christian, and they were very careful. Eventually, for a long time, they didn't give the money back, and I think my friend who had done the loan just forgot about it. And then eventually the person said, here's your money back. And, the person was actually surprised because they had known the person's situation was so desperate, they really didn't expect to get any money back, but they did. And so that was a good thing. And now that's kind of the attitude Jesus is saying, is different from the world. Because the world, if you don't pay me back in a year, which is what I can take you to court and, try and get the money back that way. Or in those days, they would have thrown you into debtor's prison and your family, and you would have had to figure out some way to pay it, or you would not have gotten out of prison. So Jesus is saying, if we're going to love people, we need to be different. We need to do more than what the regular world does. Love your enemies, verse 35. Love your enemies. Do what is good and lend expecting nothing in return. Then your reward will be good. So in verse 35, he mentions all three topics again. Love your enemies, doing good, do what is good, okay? Doesn't matter, always do what's good. And lend expecting nothing in return. So he summarized those three examples he just made, and he summarized them and said, this should be your constant attitude. Whether you're going to get love back, whether you're going to get good back, or whether you're going to get paid back. Our constant call is to love and do good and be there for others financially. Obviously, if you can't, you can't. But if you can do that, then do that. Then your reward will be great, and you will be sons of the Most High. For He is gracious to the ungrateful and evil. One of the questions raised in Job and many other people is why do the evil sometimes prosper? And Jesus doesn't answer that entirely, but he does imply here, while we're on earth, God is gracious to all of us, and He's hoping, I think, that we'll see He's being gracious to us and acknowledge it. But the evil don't acknowledge it; they just want more, and they want to be more self-satisfied. But God is still gracious, hoping that, I think, that we will appreciate His graciousness. Be merciful, just as your Father is also merciful. So, gracious tends to be more about material stuff in this case, because he talks about be gracious. He's gracious to the ungrateful and evil, and merciful tends to be more about forgiving. God tends to be forgiving even when we don't acknowledge Him a lot of times, when we aren't merciful. But we need to be like Him and be merciful, even when people around us are not. Let's see how we're doing time. Okay, got time to go on. So, and that kind of continues in the next few verses, which I'm just going to read 37 and 38. Do not judge, and you will not be judged. Do not condemn, and you will not be condemned. Forgive, and you will be forgiven. Give, and it will be given to you, a good measure, pressed down, shaken together, running over, be poured out into your lap. For with the measure you use, it will be measured back. Okay, so this kind of, my Bible has a little new heading here, do not judge. But I think this is connected pretty strongly with what Jesus has just said. He just said, love, be gracious, be merciful all the time. Do not judge. Not your job. God's the judge. It's not our job to judge. It's our job to be loving and gracious and merciful. So I think that does follow. Do not condemn, and you will not be condemned. Now, this doesn't mean you don't recognize good and evil. I mean, some people tend to treat this as do not judge. That means you shouldn't form any opinions at all. No, but it means you should not condemn people when they are wrong. Okay, you're still acknowledging that they're wrong, but you're not condemning them. You're not judging them for it. You're not being nasty to them. I mean, judging a person who's very judgmental, what do they come across like? If anybody does anything wrong, what do?
Jump on them.
Yeah, they jump on them. That's the judgmentalism.
Extremely opinionated.
Yeah, that's and I hear people who say that as a virtue almost. Well, I don't never hesitate to express my opinions. What that means is they're willing to be judgmental all the time. I form opinions about what is good and evil because I am God's person. But Jesus calls me not to be judgmental about that. So if a person comes to me and says they're having this problem and this and that and things are wrong, no, I don't sit there and just say, you should have done that, you shouldn't have done that, you shouldn't have done that, you're a dirty, rotten sinner, go away. No, I say, no, I hear you, I listen to you, I see that you're distressed by this. Let's talk about how God can get, how you can get close to God in this. Anyway, so I'm not being judgmental toward them. And, if they don't get it right, eventually God will judge them. That's not my job. So I don't condemn. I don't condemn the person. I hope that God does not judge me and does not condemn me for the things that I've done wrong. So I try to treat other people that way. Again, that doesn't mean you don't form opinions of right and wrong. If you're a Christian and you have a sense of right and wrong, you certainly will. But you're willing to keep them to yourselves and express the mercy and love of God in hopes that a person will come and receive that mercy and love from God. You're not there pounding them over the head with what they've done wrong and saying what an awful person they are. So that's pretty clear. Okay, so the judging and the condemning have to do with the merciful that you talked about before, being merciful as your Father is merciful. So that's be merciful is the positive statement. The do not judge, do not condemn is the reverse, saying don't do those, but be merciful instead. And then he says, give and it will be given to you. That's like being gracious to other people, at least in the world especially, right? So give and it will be given to you. A good measure, pressed down, shaken together, running over, poured out into your lap. Okay. Now, that might seem a little odd. So when you buy flour today, we buy it in these little white bags, right? But in those days, if you bought grain to to make bread with, how would you get it home? The guy selling the grain just has a pile of grain there.
Sack.
And he doesn't have little plastic bags like the giant. Maybe you've been thoughtful to bring a sack, but most people didn't do that. What they did was they picked up the front of their robe and kind of bunched it like this and had the guy pour the pound or 2 pounds or whatever the measure was of grain into the front of your robe, the lap of your robe, and carry it home. And then you would dump it into your bowl there. Why not carry your bowl? Because you might drop and break your bowl. If you dropped your robe front and lost your grain, you only lost your grain. The bowl for a poor person was a very valuable thing. You didn't want to risk breaking that. So that's what people did. Is they would just, if they were buying a measure of grain, they would just make a little, pouch in the front of their robe and have the guy pour it into that and carry it home. So that was being poured into their lap. But what he's saying is here that the guy's going to give you a good measure. So you make your little thing and he's pouring it in and you're saying, wait a minute, stop! it's starting to overflow. I can't carry it anymore. And he's still pouring it. And that's the picture that's being painted here. That's the picture that's being painted here. If you're a giving person, that this kind of goodness will be returned to you. For the measure you use, it will be measured back to you. Now, I know there are some people who say, well, there are other places where it says if you give a certain amount, God will give it back to you 10 or 100-fold. And they make this into a promise that, if you give to God, God's always going to give you, 10 times or 100 times back. So this is why you should give to God. But that's, to me, a very selfish appeal, right? Give to God so He can give you 10 to 100 times back. Now, isn't that a selfish appeal?
Yes, it is.
I don't think that's what Jesus intends. He's saying God is generous, but He's not making a quid pro quo that you should give to God because God is always generous. He's trying to say, if you've got a generous spirit and you are generous with other people, you're going to find that generosity pours back to you at times. Because people will respond with generosity, and God Himself will respond with generosity. It's not a quid pro quo. You're not guaranteed 5% back or 10% back or 5 times back or 10 times back or 100 times back. It's God's going to bless you if you are blessing God. And I don't think it's always financial. I think that's the other thing. They make it, if you give, $100 to God, God's going to give you $1,000 back. No, He might, but He might just bless you in some other way that you really feel like, wow, I was really able to help that person, and I feel the love of God in a way that I haven't felt it before. And that would be as great, or maybe a much greater blessing than getting $1,000 back, right? Because $1,000 back, you go, okay, what can I spend it on? You get love back and a feeling of, I did something really good and I feel really good about it. That just changes who you are and makes you better. I think that's a better reward. Isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. So I think that's what Jesus is talking about. And I don't think He means just, get your finances. Okay. So it's about 20 up. So I think I'm going to end here, and I think there's enough here to next time we'll finish probably the chapter and finish the message. Well, Laura obviously didn't make it, but I still want to remember to pray for her Uncle Charlie, great Uncle Charlie. So he's 94 and he's in, or 90 something, and he's in,
Hospice care.
he's in hospice care. And he's not doing well, he has dementia and other issues. So we'll keep him. Sharon's not doing particularly well. I mean, she still can take care of herself, but she's gotten to the point again where she doesn't feel comfortable going up and down the stairs. So she's pretty much just staying in the room, and she gets herself to the bathroom and back and stuff, which is good. But I'm pretty much taking the meals to her, giving her snacks and stuff to her. So that I don't like to be gone too long because of her needs and stuff. We're working on helping with that. I'm getting a little tiny fridge to put in the room so she can have some cold stuff there. I think I'll put some dry snacks she likes in the Euro drawer or something. So she has a place for things there that she likes. But so anyway, so keep her in your prayers. Now she has better days where she feels a little stronger and stuff, and then she has days where she feels pretty weak. So I don't know. That doesn't look like the Lyme treatment has done anything good. So I think once the current round of pills expires, I don't get it. Yeah. I don't know. We have to talk to the doctor. See what's going on.
And to be a conference.
Yeah, we'll have to do it. Otherwise, folks in general, I don't know. Gone okay. We keep Bob in our prayers.
She's still in the hospital.
Yeah, but I haven't talked to him. So, I thought that the business meeting went reasonably well. Still I need to get some big. So, so, let's see. Ukraine. Oh, Ukraine. And I'm a little concerned that like the news programs are so focused on that other significant things that are happening are tending to get lost. That often happens in news, whatever is the most attracts the most attention, kind of overwhelms other news. But sometimes that other news is important. So kind of about news programs that are covering some other stuff besides the Ukraine stuff. Tornadoes out can be blessed and some other things that really didn't get much coverage. That if grain had been pounded, they would have been the big news. You know. And instead they got 15 seconds. Some birdie, some mixed. So those people get help.
Want me to start?
Yeah. Okay.
Heavenly Father, we thank you. Thank you for the time to open up the scriptures and help us to read between the lines. Help us to apply it to our lives and love you and love you. To not expect to get return for all the good that we do. To not judge others, not judge our not ours. And we just pray that we are examples of the people that you want us to be. We think of our world today, of course, in Ukraine, the suffering there because of Russia's invasion. And we just pray, Lord, that you would be with all the leaders and that there will be some times when we will back down and turn around and go back to Russia. We pray for the families that have opened up their homes in the neighboring countries to all of these displaced people. And we're so thankful for them. We're thankful for the organizations that are truly helping the people. And help us to have discernment as to if we want to help, which organization do we choose? Where will our money be the best? And help us, Lord, to open their homes to those in need. We pray, Lord, for our shut-ins, for Claudia, and for Marcia. We pray especially for Sharon. We pray that her good days are not the bad ones. And that as the pastor cares for her and getting her refrigerator and will have a snack drawer for her. We pray that her needs will be met. We pray, Lord, for your healing hand to be with her and also with Pastor as he gives her the time and energy to meet her needs. We think of the tornadoes in our country and the things that get pushed to the back page of the paper because they're not as important or not as newsworthy as the troubles in the Ukraine. But our weather patterns are so changing, and we just pray that you will be with those who are endangered in tornadoes and bad storms and bad highways and collapsing bridges. And just pray, Lord, that people will have wisdom and insight as to where to go, where to be, when to take cover. We ask all this, Lord, and also now that we are giving up masks voluntarily, that there will be no resurgence in the COVID. There will be no new mutations that cripple our country. And we think of the various side effects that are showing up now in people who had COVID that were not heard of before. And we just pray, Lord, that you will guide and direct all of us to be your people. And we give you thanks and honor and glory. Hallelujah. You are Lord, our Savior, Creator, and we love you. Amen.
Lord God, we thank you and praise you for your love and grace to us, your presence. Lord, continue to guide us and lead us. Let us truly be your people. Let us be led by your Spirit, not just our own motivation. We thank you for your love and grace, your purpose and presence in our lives. In Jesus' holy name. Video off.